What comes to mind when you think about the Middle East? For many, the immediate answer is conflict. This perception, while somewhat stereotypical, isn't entirely baseless. Today, no less than 9 wars are actively being fought across this region, drawing international attention. These major battles in countries such as Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Libya, Lebanon, Israel, and Palestine beg the question, why is the Middle East so steeped in conflict? What are the underlying causes of this seemingly perpetual state of war? To understand this complex issue, we need to unravel the intricate tapestry of factors that contribute to the region's instability. Factors such as autocratic regimes, pervasive poverty, a young demographic, and deep-seated inequality. So let's embark on this journey of understanding together. Join us as we delve into the primary causes of conflict in the Middle East. First and foremost, we must address the prevalence of autocratic regimes. The Middle East is no stranger to these regimes, where power is concentrated in the hands of a few, often leading to oppressive governance. These regimes have a significant role in sparking conflict in the region. Autocratic regimes are notorious for their lack of accountability. They consolidate power and curtail individual freedoms, denying citizens the right to choose their leaders or influence the direction of their nations. This lack of political freedom often leads to tension between the populace and the government. When peaceful means of expressing discontent are stifled, people may resort to violent methods to voice their opposition. Take a look at Syria, Libya, and Yemen, for instance. Each of these nations has experienced civil wars in recent years, driven in large part by the people's desire to overthrow oppressive autocratic regimes. In Syria, the civil war began as a popular uprising against the Assad regime, which had ruled with an iron fist for decades. In Libya, the people rose against Muammar Gaddafi's 4-decade rule, triggering a civil war. Yemen, too, has been in a state of conflict for years, with the people seeking to overthrow an authoritarian regime. The lack of democratic processes in these nations is a critical factor. In many Middle Eastern countries, there is simply no peaceful, democratic means for citizens to change their government. This absence of a democratic outlet often drives people to resort to violent means, further exacerbating the conflict. It's worth noting that almost every Middle Eastern nation is governed by some form of autocratic regime. Only 2 of the 19 nations in the Middle East and North Africa are considered democracies. The lack of freedom and the inability to effect change through democratic means is a primary motivator for conflict in these nations. The absence of true democracy has led people to take up arms in an attempt to change their governance. They see no other option, given the lack of democratic processes. The desire for a more democratic, accountable government creates a potent catalyst for conflict and unrest. In the grand scheme of things, the presence of autocratic regimes is just one piece of the puzzle, but it's a significant piece. These regimes, with their oppressive rule and lack of accountability, create an environment ripe for conflict. The lack of democratic processes gives people few other options but to resort to violence to voice their discontent and strive for change. Thus, the lack of democracy in many Middle Eastern countries fuels tensions and leads to conflict. The presence of autocratic regimes, the suppression of individual freedoms, and the absence of democratic channels for change all contribute to the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East. If we hope to understand the root causes of these conflicts, we must first understand the role that autocratic regimes play in fueling them. Another significant cause of conflict in the Middle East is the pervasive poverty. The destitution that plagues this region is not a new phenomenon. It has been a persistent issue for decades, and it's a crucial factor in understanding the ongoing conflicts. So, how does poverty lead to conflict? Well, when people are struggling to meet their basic needs, when they can't put food on the table or provide a secure shelter for their families, desperation sets in, and desperate people are often driven to desperate measures. They may be forced to engage in illicit activities, or they may be more susceptible to joining extremist groups that promise a way out of their dire circumstances. This cycle of poverty and desperation can spiral into violence and conflict. Now let's look at the numbers. It's estimated that poverty affects 18.6 million people in the Middle East. That's a staggering number. It's hard to even comprehend the scale of that hardship. But it's not just about the numbers. Behind each statistic is a person, a family, a community that's grappling with the harsh realities of poverty. And the situation has been getting worse. Over the past 5 years, the number of people living in poverty across the Middle East and North Africa has more than doubled. The economic downturns, the political instability, the ongoing conflicts, they've all contributed to this increase in poverty. And as poverty levels rise, so too does the potential for conflict. It's a vicious cycle, but poverty doesn't just lead to conflict. It also makes it harder to resolve conflicts once they've started. Think about it. If a community is struggling to survive, if they're focused on meeting their basic needs, they're less likely to have the resources or the energy to engage in peace-building efforts. Poverty can make it harder to break out of the cycle of violence and move towards a more peaceful future. And let's not forget about the impact of poverty on the younger generation. With limited access to quality education and job opportunities, many young people in the Middle East feel hopeless and disenfranchised. They're growing up in a world where they can't see a path to a better future. And this sense of hopelessness can feed into the cycle of conflict. So you see, poverty in the Middle East isn't just about the lack of financial resources. It's about the lack of hope, the lack of opportunities, the lack of a stable future. And all of these factors contribute to the ongoing conflicts in the region. In conclusion, the pervasive poverty in the Middle East is a significant contributor to the region's conflicts. The inability of a large portion of the population to meet basic needs sets the stage for unrest and conflict. Until this issue is addressed, until poverty is reduced and opportunities are increased, the cycle of conflict in the Middle East is likely to continue. The Middle East has a particularly young population, which contributes to the region's instability. The average age in this region is barely 26 years old. This young demographic, not necessarily a disadvantage, becomes a catalyst for conflict under certain circumstances. Let's delve deeper into why a younger population can lead to more conflict. Firstly, young people require employment and opportunities. In a region where unemployment rates are high and opportunities are scarce, the frustration and desperation can quickly escalate. If these needs are not met, young people are more susceptible to being drawn towards radical ideologies that promise a sense of purpose or a way out. This is a dangerous path that can lead to increased tension and conflict. Secondly, young people are often less invested in maintaining the status quo. They are more inclined to challenge existing systems and advocate for social change. While this can be a powerful force for positive transformation, it can also lead to instability and conflict, especially when the desire for change meets resistance. The demographic reality of the Middle East further amplifies these issues. For instance, in Iraq, the average age is just 21. In Syria, it's 25. And in Yemen, it's a mere 20 years old. These countries, all embroiled in long-standing conflicts, have a significant portion of their population in the fighting age. This term refers to the age group that is most likely to be involved in conflict, either as combatants or as targets of violence. These countries are also grappling with a lack of opportunities for their young populations. High unemployment rates, limited access to quality education, and a lack of social mobility all contribute to a sense of hopelessness and frustration. This, in turn, can lead to increased susceptibility to radicalization and participation in conflict. But it's not just about the numbers. The youth in these countries are growing up amidst ongoing conflict and instability. This means that many young people have known nothing but war and disruption. This lived experience of conflict can shape attitudes, fuel resentment, and perpetuate cycles of violence. Moreover, the lack of effective youth engagement strategies in these countries is also a problem. Without meaningful ways to participate in society and influence decision-making, young people can feel alienated and disenfranchised. This can further fuel feelings of frustration and resentment, increasing the likelihood of conflict. In conclusion, the Middle East's youthful population is both a challenge and an opportunity. If properly harnessed and provided with the right opportunities, this vibrant demographic could be a powerful force for positive change. However, if neglected or exploited, it could contribute to the continuation of the region's many conflicts. The youthful demographic, coupled with a lack of opportunities, creates a breeding ground for conflict. It highlights the urgency of addressing youth unemployment and disenfranchisement in the region. Only by doing so can we hope to break the cycle of conflict and build a more peaceful, stable Middle East. Inequality in the Middle East, particularly economic inequality, is another major cause of conflict. The disparity between the affluent and the impoverished is stark, and this imbalance plays a significant role in fueling the region's ongoing conflicts. Let's start by acknowledging that the Middle East is home to some of the world's wealthiest countries. Nations like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Qatar boast impressive skyscrapers, booming economies, and an abundance of natural resources, particularly oil and gas. These nations have been able to leverage their wealth to create infrastructures, industries, and lifestyles that are the envy of many around the world. However, on the other side of this coin, we find nations like Yemen, Syria, and Palestine, where poverty is rampant, and the basic necessities of life are hard to come by. In these places, the struggle for survival is real and constant. The majority of the population lives below the poverty line, and opportunities for upward mobility are scarce. The gap between these two realities is immense, and it's not just about the difference in financial means, it's also about access to opportunities, education, healthcare, and even basic human rights. The wealthy minority, often backed by powerful regimes, continues to amass wealth and power, while the majority remains trapped in a cycle of poverty and deprivation. This economic inequality generates a sense of injustice and resentment among the less fortunate. They see the wealth and prosperity of their neighbors, yet they struggle to put food on their table. This resentment can easily be manipulated by extremist groups who promise to level the playing field by overthrowing the existing regimes. This is a common narrative in many of the conflicts that we see in the Middle East. Moreover, this inequality is not only between countries, but also within them. In many Middle Eastern countries, the wealth is concentrated in the hands of a small elite, while a significant portion of the population lives in poverty. This internal disparity further exacerbates tensions and can lead to civil unrest and conflict. For example, in Iraq, despite its vast oil reserves, many Iraqis live in poverty. The country's wealth is controlled by a small group of elites, leaving the majority of the population struggling to survive. This has led to widespread resentment and has been a significant factor in the ongoing conflict in the country. Inequality is not the sole cause of conflict in the Middle East, but it is a significant contributing factor. It fuels resentment, breeds discontent, and provides a fertile ground for extremist ideologies to take root. In conclusion, addressing inequality is a crucial step towards achieving lasting peace in the Middle East. It's about more than just redistributing wealth. It's about providing equal opportunities, ensuring access to basic services like education and healthcare, and empowering individuals to break the cycle of poverty and deprivation. Until these issues are addressed, the cycle of conflict is likely to continue. The stark contrast between the wealthy and the impoverished fuels resentment and fuels conflict. As we've explored, there are several key factors contributing to the conflicts in the Middle East. This region, known for its rich history and diverse cultures, is unfortunately also recognized for its ongoing struggles and strife. These conflicts don't simply arise from nowhere. They stem from deep-rooted issues ingrained in the societal structure and political landscape. Autocratic regimes are a significant cause. This form of governance, where power is concentrated in the hands of a few, often leads to a lack of accountability. Citizens are deprived of their fundamental rights, and their freedom of choice is suppressed. This lack of democracy fuels discontent and unrest, triggering wars as people rise up against their oppressors in an attempt to claim their rights. Then there's the pervasive poverty. It's a harsh reality that millions face in the Middle East. The inability to provide for oneself and one's family, coupled with a lack of government support, creates a fertile ground for conflict. As poverty rates have seen a dramatic increase in recent years, it's no surprise that conflicts have followed suit. The region's young demographics also play a crucial role. With the average age barely crossing the mid-20s, the Middle East is teeming with youth. When opportunities for employment and growth are scarce, young people may be swayed towards radical ideologies. Their disengagement from the status quo and their readiness for change can lead to unrest. Lastly, there's the glaring issue of inequality. Despite the wealth accumulated from natural resources and industries like tourism and banking, it's not evenly distributed. This disparity, where a small fraction enjoys the lion's share of wealth, stokes resentment and fuels conflict. But it's important to remember that these are not insurmountable challenges. Understanding these root causes is the first step to addressing them. It's through this understanding that we can start working towards a more peaceful future for the Middle East. It's a long journey ahead, but with concerted efforts and a commitment to change, it's a journey worth embarking on. Understanding these causes is the first step in addressing the conflicts and working towards a more peaceful future for the Middle East.